other people. And so the first one of those is really pretty straightforward, which is what exactly is a chronic illness? What is a chronic ailment? Maybe if someone wants to jump in, maybe say some examples, what makes something chronic versus acute, maybe.
Okay, would you like me to give you my definition?
Yeah, sure.
A chronic illness is something that's always there. You always feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very long lasting. Mm-hmm.
Examples would be diabetes, hypertension.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that doesn't have a definitive cure per se. It can be controlled, but not, as someone said, it's always there. So it becomes a chronic, something you live with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Something that maybe doesn't have a defined end, right? Something that you can't just take a medicine and it goes away forever. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts?
I think of it as something that doctors can't do too much to cure, you know, that you just have to live with. Like arthritis, there's no real treatment for it. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but that's how I think of it.
Yeah, certainly. You know, there's this idea of it's something that you can maybe manage, but there's not really a cure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There may be various interventions from time to time, surgery, medications, whatever, but it's not going to cure the underlying disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So if we move in to this slide, yeah, so some of the real things that we talked about are that they're long lasting, right? They're things that, and really this is a very broad topic, and depending on who you talk to, like which organization, they'll have a different definition of what exactly are chronic illnesses. But generally it's things that are long lasting. They're things that require medical attention, right? So either like medication or keeping in touch with the doctor or something like that. And they can also limit our daily activities, right? So we mentioned arthritis, even diabetes. These are things that will sort of have to change the way that we live our lives accordingly. So like I mentioned, some of those are associated with lifestyle diseases. And so they're sort of called lifestyle diseases because they're diseases that aren't things that we catch, but instead are due to long-term habits and sort of the way that we lived over the entire course of our life. Right, so things like diet, things like exercise, things like using tobacco and alcohol can really shape a lot of these illnesses. And like we said, right, there's not really necessarily a cure, but instead they oftentimes need to be managed, right? And it's something that I'm sure each of you will either have experienced or know people who have experienced them in your life. Certainly, like both my parents have some sort of chronic ailment. My grandparents certainly, and so right. So some of those examples are like heart disease and diabetes, like we already mentioned, hypertension. We have a lot of the breathing disorders like asthma, COPD, which stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, arthritis, even cancer can be thought of as a chronic illness because it's something that's often long lasting, something that takes a long time before there's a cure if there is one, and then. Like even AIDS, so AIDS is an infectious disease, it's a virus, but it's a virus without a cure, right? So it really needs to be managed. And then of course, diseases related to old age like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. As I mentioned, this is something that is a very big problem. It's not something that is sort of like happens to a couple people every now and then, but generally speaking, 6 out of 10 adults in the US have chronic disease, according to the CDC, and about 4 in 10 have 2 or more, right? So everything, heart disease, cancer, lung disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, questions? So with that,
I have one question quickly.
Mhm.
Does ALS fall into that category?
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
chronic. Okay. My husband had it.
Mm-hmm. Right, ALS is probably the most characteristic one because it's sort of chronic and there's not much that we don't even know that much about it still. So. Mhm. So now that we sort of have an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about chronic illness, what are some of the challenges that we either experience or that we see those around us experience who have chronic illness or chronic ailments? I should mention beforehand that because the range is so big, the challenges will be very different, right? So someone with late stage Alzheimer's will have very different challenges from someone with hypertension because the way they present is very different. But nonetheless, there are some challenges which are sort of constant with all of these. So what are some of those?
I would say, this is Sophia, I would say one of the biggest challenges is managing your chronic illnesses, those things you have to do to kind of keep it under control or to be able to live a life with some quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely an effect on sort of the way that we live life and the quality of life that we have. And we have to figure out how to do what we can while also taking care of ourselves. Mm-hmm.
Difficulty in activities of daily living, just having enough energy to do your housework and prepare meals and things of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
And also getting dressed can be a problem if you're very stiff and can't bend over to put on your shoes.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, so many things that we maybe take for granted before can change as these chronic illnesses develop.
Another would be access to health care, whether or not you have health insurance.
Mm.
So it's often found more often in people of lower income status.
I would add mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Chronic disease by its definition sort of engenders a little bit of hopelessness. So keeping the correct attitude.
Mm-hmm. Right, both of those are great points, right? Certainly, all of these problems that just come with health problems get compounded when they happen in our lower income communities with less access to healthcare. Maybe you have to travel further on like public transportation just to get to the hospital and things like that. So all of those exacerbate so many of the problems with chronic illness. And definitely part of it, right? The word chronic makes it seem easy to, feel like there's not much of an end and maybe it can cause stress and mental health difficulties. Mm-hmm.
I think with some chronic diseases, there is social stigma could be attached. So you could be dealing with being ostracized or being discriminated against or self-isolating because of those things. Right,
exactly. There's social stigma that can be felt by others or even inside ourselves, right? Where it's like, oh, this is something that I don't feel the way I used to. I don't feel good about going into society and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way I sort of framed it is there are sort of ones that are more lifestyle, the way that we live, and ones that are more based on our mental health and the way that we interact with others. So sort of most obviously is that chronic illness directly leads to pain, fatigue, maybe stiffness and inability to do things that we used to be able to do. And because of that, right, we're forced to change the way that we live. If we work, the work that we do might become harder. If we even just cooking and doing stuff around the house can be so much more difficult. Yes, it's harder. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so then you have to make lifestyle. So sometimes the things that we enjoy doing are also more difficult, right? Like if we were avid sports people and like going outside and doing things, maybe it can be more difficult to do those if, for example, we have arthritis and it's harder to move around. What else? And then oftentimes part of taking care of our bodies means changing some things that we really enjoy doing, right? Like if you think about even in the case of like diabetes and hypertension, changing our diet matters so much. And unfortunately, we're used to eating things that might not be the best for us in these cases, right? And this isn't a talk on diabetes or hypertension, but certainly, I think our society and then also just the way that our bodies are wired makes us like salts and fats and sugars. And unfortunately, salts and fats and sugars are the things that also, lead to diabetes and hypertension in the first case. All right, so tobacco and alcohol, for example, and then also perhaps needing to exercise more. And then also it can be difficult to become more dependent, to sort of lose some of that independence that we're used to, right? I know for my granddad, who is 90, he's 95 this year, so he's getting up there. But he was super independent, and he refused to have a live-in caretaker. But now, he's in China, all of his family's in the U.S., so it's kind of like, well, so we want to take care of you, but it's hard. So now he finally has a live-in housekeeper, and that's been good for him. And then, of course, there's also changes perhaps in the way that we physically look. There's some of the social stigmas that are associated with that, perhaps, and then in how we interact with others.
Okay.
And then a big.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Oh, and then the other big component to that is mental health. So with mental health, we talked about how these changes and this inability to do things that we wanted to do can cause stress, frustration, anger, especially because, unlike say like a sore throat or like the flu, it's not necessarily the thing where a doctor can come to you and say, 6 weeks later or like 2 weeks later, you'll get better. Right? These are things that need to be managed and will oftentimes be with us for the long term. And of course, this can lead to depression and anxiety, and then with depression and anxiety, isolation from the friends and family that we care about. So these are all things that we need to sort of keep an eye out for, right? Because this isn't necessarily the illness itself, but things that really come along with it and things that can sort of sneak up on us, right? Certainly, I know friends from college who are just sort of living life, and all of a sudden it seems like, well, why is my life now so much different from the way my life was, like 2-3 months ago? So, turns out the stress and the anxiety had been building up to the point where it was difficult to live life normally. Right, and yeah, of course, these all compound, right? These mental health issues can sort of affect and make our lifestyle changes even more difficult. And so they sort of spiral. And so these are definitely things to keep an eye out for.
So for moving on to the next question, how can people with chronic illness deal with some of the challenges that come along with that?
Well, I wish there were even more support groups for certain illnesses, but that certainly is a really key thing for many people.
More support groups.
I mean, everything from understanding more about your illness because it's reflected in other people's experience, but also the kind of support to solve the problems to help solve the problems of some of the obstacles that stand in your way now that you've got this chronic illness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mary makes a very good point. I think that a chronic illness can be isolating. And being part of a support group, or whether formal or informal, can work against that. And that's going to also help, well, mental health.
Definitely.
of course, getting people out to those meetings or to the support groups, the more isolated they become is a challenge. Unfortunately, I speak from experience here at home.
Right. So maybe being proactive about starting to get that support early to not feel as isolated. I think that's a really great one as well. Anyone else have any ideas?
Gloria, I saw that you were saying something, but I think you were muted.
Yes, well, I unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
I just said I wish they had a support group for people who have many chronic illnesses. I have so many that I couldn't go to all support groups for all of them.
Oh, dear.
And then I have long-term medical problems that could be helped, but I'm not doing all that I could possibly be doing. So I keep on trying, though.
Absolutely, yeah. So there were a few things that I think you mentioned that are really valuable. So the fact that oftentimes people don't have one chronic illness. Very often people have several. A lot of them come hand in hand. So diabetes and hypertension, or like mobility issues and stiffness that I know someone mentioned earlier. So I think that's a really valuable point. And also, I think one thing that you said that I've heard echoed in many cases is feeling like someone's not, like you're not doing enough. But I think it's also really important to acknowledge that I speak from experience with my mom, because sometimes I push her. She has multiple chronic illnesses, and knowing that you're doing what you can.
Sometimes it seems to me that I'm not doing all the things I should just because I don't want to spend all my time taking care of my health. Like, for example, there's a set of hand exercises I could do, and I just don't take the time to do them.
Oh, absolutely. You want to be able to have a life outside of having to constantly take care of your health care. I think that's also super valid. You deserve to have time to do things that you enjoy, not only having to take care of your health.
Well, then there's the fact that all these things take time, and there's only so many hours in a day, and you're kind of fatigued anyway. So it would be impossible to do all the things that would be nice to do, for yourself.
This is Sophia. In addition to support groups, I think if you can connect with a group like your exercise group, for example, that you really enjoy being with. I mean, it seems that whatever your challenge is, they always say exercise. So if you can, connect with a group, find someone in that group that kind of, you encourage each other to come to the class. Being in an exercise class or whatever kind of class is also helpful, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this group is helpful too.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I think having a support system is really important. And also, Sophia, your point about exercise is true. Sometimes as hard as it might be for some of us to want to get moving, in many ways it can help. But also knowing that your limits is also important. Challenging yourself, but not too much.
Well, we could just think about if we didn't have Zoom, how much worse this isolation would be. Because I think if you want to get engaged in an exercise class or in a discussion or learn things, there are multiple opportunities. Unfortunately, some older folks are not as comfortable with Zoom and some of the modern technology. So one of the things that the village is trying to do is to help people so they can get connected at a time when too many people may be isolated.
Well, I can connect with Zoom okay, but trying to do exercises, looking at how they're done on an iPhone like is really just about impossible in my apartment. With poor vision too, and probably needing to do exercises where I have to sit down most of the time.
Yeah, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think especially with, although Zoom is really fantastic, and I think it's a great point that I think a lot of us would be more isolated if it weren't for this. Accessibility to technology is a really big concern. Being able to work your way around technology, and also, like you said, Gloria, being able to adapt the things that you do may be harder if you're doing it from, you know, a tiny screen and not in a physical class where someone can help you adapt your movements. So I think that's a great point.
I wanted to say that I think everyone on the call knows that we have the exercise every day at 10. And when we first started doing this on Zoom, Janae, our yoga teacher, didn't have a computer to use. So she actually did the yoga. She instructed the yoga class over the phone. She was just on the phone, and her instructions were such that we were able to follow along. So, you know, you don't have to use the video. And Gloria, you could just call in and follow along with the
I think I went to one of her classes and I liked it. There's just so many things that I need to do. It's hard to.
Yeah.
And this is all more difficult during these times. Trying to get groceries delivered and having them run out of stuff that you need and not have stuff that you need. So it's challenging. And yeah, but I love Zoom. It's good for things like this. You know, it would make it easier for me to attend many of the Chicago Hyde Park Village events, but the exercise part is kind of hard. Yeah, I really liked the drop-ins when they had multiple things happening, like exercises to start with and socializing at lunch and then a program. That was really nice. I hope we can get back to that sometime soon.
Someday.
I've enjoyed the Zoom on exercise, but I think, you know, a lot of villagers are not coming to these Zoom events, exercise or drop in or anything. I phoned one villager that I hadn't seen, and she said she hadn't learned Zoom yet. And I told her, you know, there's not a lot to learn. It's really very simple. This is how you do it. But I think a lot of villagers just are not connected with Zoom, which I agree, it's a wonderful thing. This whole isolation would be a lot harder if we didn't have Zoom.
Yeah, and one member doesn't even have a computer, so she can't really connect. She doesn't have an iPhone either, you know, so.
Michelle, is there funding available for such needs or that she could be directed to?
Well, there are two things. You can just call in from a landline phone.
Oh, that's true.
And we have been doing some trials with people that don't have computers. So yeah, we are working on that to get more people connected.
Yeah, so I think those are all really. Oh, sorry, was someone saying something?
Yeah, Sophia. I was just going to say, I'm talking to myself too, not to the group, but I think one of the most important things is we have to keep trying to find a way to encourage ourselves to do those things we need to do. Because I know for me, I don't necessarily have anybody in my life that's encouraging me to do things. So if we can get up and find a way to be positive about, as positive as possible about things, everything, and about people as much as possible. I think that's the beginning. We have to have as much of a positive mindset as possible. Then we can manage to try to do some of those things we need to do to manage our chronic illness.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point, Sophia. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think that's important for every stage of life and anything that you're dealing with, maintaining positivity and working towards your goals. So thank you for that.
I think we have to be happy with the things that we are doing. We can't do everything, but like be positive that we are doing some things that help, like coming to this meeting, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think everything, all achievements are great, you know, whether it's getting out of bed in the morning or doing something that's been on your checklist for a long time, you know, you did it. So yeah, so let's move on to talking a little bit. I mean, I think we really covered a lot of fantastic things here. There were a few things that I wanted to mention. So setting reasonable goals and tasks for your day. And I think we spoke about this a little bit, but something that has personally helped me is making lists. And you know, by making a list and having the satisfaction of crossing something off at the end of the day, it helps you feel a lot more accomplished. So I think that's one way to kind of keep the positivity and help you feel like you're, you know, well, realize that you're actually doing a lot of wonderful things and that you're capable of accomplishing things, even though it seems like you have so much going on. So another great thing that we kind of touched on with the exercise, but mindfulness activities. So just doing something that you enjoy that helps get your mind off of things, whether it's meditating, praying, going for a walk. I know some people like to do things with their hands. So, you know, spending some quiet time knitting or, you know, doing a certain craft or even reading a book. So taking time for yourself that is just that me time, you know. And other things, we talked about the support groups. I think that was widely expressed in the group that it's a very important thing to do. So I think that was, yeah, a really great point. And talking to a mental health provider. I know we've had some mentions of mental health and how important it is to address that because it does come along with chronic illness. So I think I can't see the slides, Andrew, but
Oh, I can jump in on this one.
Okay, great.
So I don't know if you can see the graphic. This is developed by someone who I think it was from a person with lupus. So it's generally designed more for younger folks. Lupus is an autoimmune chronic illness. But the idea is that I think in her talk she mentioned that there were like you can think of in a day you get like 4 spoons, 24 spoons, sorry, and then you can allocate your spoons to different things. But the idea is you shouldn't feel bad, and you shouldn't feel bad if you don't get everything that you used to do before you know, you had chronic illness done, right? Because the idea is that a lot of these things take energy, and you know, as these chronic illnesses develop, we have less energy, so we need to readjust and really set reasonable expectations, right? We're not gonna go out on a run and then cook dinner from scratch and then go to work, or maybe not in that order every day, right? So the idea is that, you know, there are some activities that are maybe lower effort but are important, right? Like getting out of bed, getting dressed, taking our medications, and watching TV. So even that is something to be an accomplishment, right? So like these are things that are good. And then like bathing, maybe styling our hair or taking care of ourselves, even just going online or reading a book. You know, that's like the next level up. And then the next level up is making meals, making plans with people, maybe socializing. Right now, maybe socializing over the phone, and maybe doing a little bit of housework, cleaning up a little bit. And then if you can drive, you know, driving somewhere, going somewhere else. But again, like for right now, maybe not so much that. And then the very high effort things are, you know, like going to work or going shopping. In this case, you know, even figuring out how to get groceries ordered is probably a pain. going to the doctor or doing like a telehealth appointment or exercise. So, the idea is that all these things are at different levels of effort, and it's okay if you don't get everything done, right? You get a few things done, and there will be good days and bad days, and it's okay if you don't get like I think Gloria and a few other people mentioned that if you want to just write down a list of things that you should be doing, that list is gonna take 48 hours in a 24-hour period or something. So just sort of prioritizing that is, and just choosing a few things that you really want to get done in one day is good enough. Yes.
So in other words, you kind of need to push yourself, but also be gentle with yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. You got to get out of bed, but you don't need to save the world.
Well, right now it'd be kind of difficult, but yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard road to save. Okay.
A good goal for some people, or for myself at times, is to get out of bed before 11 o'clock in the morning, or whatever hour is a stretch for you because you don't sleep well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the reality of living with some of these ailments. Right? So, it's okay. All right. So, Alexa, do you want to take this, or I can also?
Sure. Yeah. So the next question that we'd like to talk about is, how can friends and families of individuals with chronic ailments support them?
Yeah, so maybe you can think about your own experience as someone who's supported friends with chronic illnesses. Maybe some of the ways that you would have liked to seen support from your friends and family.
I think what you'd like to have from friends and family is a certain amount of unconditional acceptance and love for yourself, and the acceptance being for you as an individual, but also that you have this condition.
Here again, I think there's a wide range of responses. In some families, the best thing you can do is just listen based on what the issue is. In other families, a child might have a severe disability and the family has means, and they establish a trust to take care of that child, for the 40 years after they pass away. And in some situations, it's hard to figure out what to do. And I'll just mention a personal one. One of my adult sons has a sort of an undiagnosable chronic condition, which is described as sort of like extreme chemical sensitivity. So he's trying to work it as a realtor, but if he goes in an open house and there's odors and musty smell, he'll get sick for several days, almost like a flu reaction. So some sort of extreme immune reaction to perfumes and smells and odors and things like that. So it really limits where he can go to a restaurant to eat. It limits the work he can do. So the frustration as an adult, seeing a child struggle with that, is how to intervene appropriately without implying that I know more than you do, or I try to be helpful and give information might be the wrong thing to do. He needs to be able to research it on his own and take ownership of it, that kind of thing. So just those are comments that come to mind.
I would say that the friends and families should include the individuals with chronic ailment in their get-togethers and in their activities as appropriate and possible. And for example, pick them up if necessary, or call them to let them know, and pick them up, or maybe they can get there on their own. I think that's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think those are all really fantastic, and you can kind of see how support can come in so many different ways. And it's important, as was mentioned, to listen to the individual and to what that specific person needs, because some people want help, some people don't want help all the time. And speaking as an overbearing family member to my mother, sometimes just being there is important, but not putting your 2 cents in. So, and I think Dawn, you mentioned something similar, allowing people to work through things on their own, but being a source of support all the same.
Oh, I want to apologize. I may have spoken over someone because I had my microphones in, but not on my head. So I didn't think anyone was talking and I just started rambling. So I apologize.
You're fine. I think you were fine. I know, Gary, you said something right before.
Yes, I was talking about friends and family giving some sort of acceptance, rather unconditional, of you, the person with the illness, but also that be acknowledging the illness, not blaming someone for it, because even if it was a lifestyle thing that did it a long time ago. You're not gonna.
Absolutely.
Well, during the pandemic, we've had to really rethink how we can be supported by family. For example, I live alone, so it was a big thing for me to be with my family, and I always traveled or they came here, and then suddenly we couldn't do that. So we really had to rework that and try to figure out how to still be supportive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, those are all really, really fantastic points.
Are we going to talk about people who don't have friends and family to support them?
Yeah, we can. Well, let's talk about that now. Who would like to, Gloria, would you like to mention something about that?
Well, I have 2 children that have their own problems, and I think they think I should be independent, and I don't feel, it's very spotty support that I get from them. But I'm trying to understand that they have problems in their lives and they don't live nearby, and do the best I can without them. And I know there are a few more things I could do, like get some kind of life alert, I think. And I think Chicago Park Village has some ways of supporting people like me too. Just trying to do the best I can without much support. I feel like they should give me some support, but maybe not. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think you bring up a really good point. I think it's sometimes difficult to manage expectations on your perspective and other people's perspective and feeling supported in a way that you need to. And I think with chronic illness, that can also be something that really affects people, and that they may feel like they're not getting the support that they need.
This is Barbara. I would also say that I think people have to have a frank discussion about this and clarify what support means, as well as there's a bit of negotiation that has to go on, it seems to me. People can often make the assumption, well, they must know what I need. Well, they really don't know what they need. And at the same time, there's a give and take in terms of, so I have some relatives, but they have family responsibilities. I have my chronic illness. I have my healthcare needs. How do we negotiate meeting both sets of needs and clearly identifying what does support look like for me? I think sometimes it's assumed that we understand what it means to support someone when we might not. It might mean a different thing to the person experiencing chronic illness than it does to their family members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Barbara. That's a fantastic point. Having frank conversations is really important. And I think that can be taken to all relationships. Because, one thing we haven't evolved to do yet is read minds. And I think things can get crossed. Wires can get crossed, and people can feel like they're not getting what they need from relationships, but without outwardly saying it, it can be difficult.
Well, I have this situation with my arthritis having gotten worse over the years, which of course it does. And then having it be recommended that I get a knee replacement, and in another 6 months I got a hip replacement. And my daughters seem to think that, you know, everything is going to be fine once I get through all these exercises. But I have more and more begun to realize how chronic the problem is, and I'm not going to feel all that much better after this this latest hip replacement. And it's gradually dawned on me, and I don't think it's dawned on my daughters, and it's a little hard to know quite how to express that they can't expect the same things of me, and they can't expect me to be as happy with what I can no longer do. But I think it's really up to me to come to grips with it enough myself that I can explain it to them, and not have them say, oh, well, pretty soon you're going to be all set because, you know, it's been 4 months or it's been however many months, and we'll be happy to see you go hiking again. Well, so in this situation, I think it's really up to me to, as I said, to come to grips enough with this is really chronic. Maybe they replace my various joints, but I'm still going to have pain and be limited in my mobility. And I think it's hard for the kids to accept that.
Absolutely, Mary. I think that's a really great point. Managing expectations, not only of yourself, but of others. And I think very salient to our conversation about chronic illness is the fact that it is chronic. And you know, there can be things that help a little bit, but it's not going to completely fix things. So you make a really fantastic point.
I think that chart you, the couple slides back or the slide, is a really good focus of discussion, because there's the hiking, Mary, which you want to do, but there's also all the other things you have to do every day that take a lot of your energy and mean that you don't necessarily have a lot left over to do hiking. And so I think when we're talking with folks who aren't experiencing chronic illness and don't understand what kind of energy it takes just to do activities of daily living, or it's helpful to point out that, you know, I have to get these things done. Then if I have the stamina, energy left over, I might be able to do those things. But this is what these are challenges on a daily basis. Again, it's being explicit about how this illness this chronic ailment is affecting you personally.
Yes, thanks.
But I like that chart, Andrew and Alexa. That was a great illustration.
Yeah, we can share that with you all. I think that would be maybe a good thing to share with family members, and kind of a good way to explain things. It's funny that I don't know if any of y'all have heard this before, but one way that people with chronic illness kind of refer to themselves is spoonies. And so I think it comes from that graphic that you only have so many spoons. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We'll, I was just going to say, I'll email the PowerPoint to you, Barbara, and you can pass it along with that.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Just in the interest of time, I think we're going to move to the last question so that we can have a little bit of a discussion with that. Andrew, do you want to take that away?
Yeah, sure. So just quickly, we basically talked about everything here. And I think the only thing that I would want to add is that with remembering that we're also friends and friends to people with chronic illness as well. So as other people's friends, right, we can also remember them, especially those who might not have family, and then check in on them perhaps a little bit more. But anyway, so I think this last question is one that is particularly pertinent for this current time. And sort of, I feel like we're all pandemic experts now, given that we've all sort of lived through what, 3 months, something like that, of social distancing and more isolation. But how do things change with our chronic illnesses? So both medically and also socially.
Well, it doesn't help any.
Certainly doesn't.
I think there's many people who experience some anxiety or fear about going to see their doctors for more or less routine care, or situation you think maybe I should be seeing somebody, maybe not, but I don't want to expose myself. So that's one aspect of this.
Yeah, for sure. Seeking care becomes a very different question.
Yeah, especially when you have to travel on public transportation, several buses, to get there.
We're considering a trip to New Mexico in July to visit our grandsons. So this requires a lot of negotiation. What is their comfort level if we, as the elders in the family, get tested before we leave Chicago, stay at a Airbnb for one night and then show up? And if we want to do a side trip to visit my wife's sister in Colorado, we would normally stay in their house, but we think, well, we should offer to purchase our own lodging elsewhere. So we're basically isolated and then visit them using social distancing things, not be in their house, raise that stress level. So in order to prevent spreading these ailments, it takes sensitivity and negotiation and some extra money.
Right, for sure. There's an element of public health as well, where we don't want to, in case we are ill, we don't want to pass this on to other people. Because we are running out of time, I'll just jump into some of the things that we have here. Most of these are focused on the taking care of the medical issues. I'll say with the social issues, things like this group are awesome. I think Zoom calls have been very good for my mental health during quarantine. But one important thing is to keep in touch with your healthcare providers. So even if you don't feel comfortable going to the office for many things, definitely keep updated with them about your chronic conditions. And if there are telehealth options, you can always try to seek those out. I know some hospitals may not have them, but I think it was sort of trial by fire once quarantine happened. It's like suddenly everyone realized that this is really important. It's important not to sort of self-medicate differently. So I know sometimes we like to, my mom does this all the time, which is terrible, which is that she'll not take her blood pressure meds until right before she goes to the doctor. And then she doesn't want a high score, so she takes her meds. It doesn't make any sense to me, but keep it constant, and then don't change anything without consulting your providers. If possible, when you go to the pharmacy, ask for, or if you get something delivered from the pharmacy, ask for 90-day supplies if possible. So you sort of limit how much you have to leave, and home delivery if possible. Just generally, it's probably a good idea to have a 2-week supply of stuff just in case that's an issue. In case you get exposed and need to stay at home, it's good to have 2 weeks worth of food that you could eat. It doesn't have to be good food, but let's see. I think if there's something routine, you can ask whether that's something that can be done at home, like a home kit, or even delayed if it's not necessarily, if it's not urgent. There's some cases where you do have to go to a clinic. For example, if you're going through chemo or if you're going through dialysis, that sort of thing. It's important in that case to call in advance, make sure that your time is not time that the hospital is particularly crowded, and then to social distance and just all the standard things, right? Wear masks, social distance, wash hands, all that good stuff. And part of it that I think is important to remember is that if we see our doctors less, we need to take more responsibility for our illnesses. So part of that means, if you're not going in every 3 months for a checkup or every month for follow-up or something, it is important to do what you can for yourself. So for example, with hypertension and diabetes, it's especially important now to check your own blood pressures and to check your own sugars. And of course, maintaining a healthy diet and exercising so that even if you're not seeing your doctor, you don't need them to yell at you to eat healthy. exercise more if possible. Yeah, any thoughts or questions about this?
I did do that with my own health. I did one of these with my own healthcare provider. I had a routine blood test for hemoglobin A1C, and I emailed my doctor and sent her my recent finger stick results for blood sugars and said, it looks like I'm stable. Can I wait until things open up to get my A1C checked? And she said, oh yes. She emailed me back and said, oh yes, you don't need to come in now. So it does work to communicate with your doctor. And I go to Northwestern, and there so I use my chart a lot, and it saved me a trip to into the city to get that test.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? Because you were able to keep track of your own finger sticks.
Yeah.
That means that you can put off that risk.
And I sent her a week's worth of results in the morning and before and after dinner, so she had something to look at.
It's awesome. Yeah. Okay. If nothing else, I will sort of finish up here. I'll say these are all a bunch of links that when I send this out, you can use either for yourself or for your family and friends and whatnot. I'll say for the COVID specific stuff, the CDC has a lot of guidelines that are specialized for whatever chronic illness you have. So it's worth taking a look at, just see what their guidance is. And that goes into much more detail than we went into here. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Andrew. This was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you all.
very
This was
much,
lots of
Andrew.
fun.
And Alexa.
And if you would stop sharing so we can get back to our screens, we do want to thank you, and hopefully we'll be able to sign you up for another session, or you or members of your group. But we really appreciate the way you did this. It was great to be so interactive and let people get their questions answered and everything. Any last comments or thoughts or announcements?
I'd just like to say this is one of the more well-presented and helpful sessions we've had with medical people, and thanks so much.
Anything else? So, well, stay tuned. We're still planning more Zoom sessions for July. There'll be another one on June 24th. We're going to have people from PACE talking about PACE paratransit so that we understand what's available to us. And then we're still planning Zoom conferences for July, so more about those in the future. Anything else, Michelle, we need to? No.
Michelle and Barbara, I was just going to say that we're thinking about this with my church, but it would be good if there was some way for people who cannot come to our meetings, our drop-in meetings when we start up again, if they can actually join us online. I don't know exactly what form that would take, if Zoom would be best or not, but some people can't get out and aren't able to do that when we get back into the regular schedule.
You know, I've heard that a lot of from a couple of different folks that, gee, it's much easier to go to X, Y, or Z meeting via Zoom. And like they want to continue it after it happens. Also, Terry reminded me, I should let you know, we're working on a virtual tour of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg exhibit at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. It's July 15th at noon. We're about ready to get it up on the website and open registration. It'll be about an hour and a half. It'll include a recording by the curator of the exhibit and discussion of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then an opportunity for Q&A with a docent. So we're really interested in trying that format and seeing how that works. We were planning a field trip there, but when all this happened, we decided we can't really schedule it before they have to close the exhibit in August. So this seemed like a good way to take advantage of that.
What about the programs that, sorry, Dottie.
That's just fantastic news.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we might do something with Rockefeller, some kind of a modified picnic if they do the bells.
Yeah.
That would be in July also.
That would be great too.
Yeah, sounds great.
Well, I think Michelle, shall we conclude the meeting?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. It was so good seeing all of you.
Good seeing everybody. Bye.
Thanks,
you. This is awesome.
Alexa. You
Bye.
were great. You guys were great.
Bye,
Thank
Jerry.
you so much.
Done. Everyone